The Tom Daniel Show. Keep listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniel Show.
You're listening to The Tom Daniel Show, and I'm your host, Tom Daniel. Hey, what did Johann Sebastian Bach actually sound like? No, I don't mean his voice or his laughter. I mean his music. Not what his music is, but not what it means, but what it actually sounded like when it came out of the air and hit somebody's ear in 1723. Because, you see, here's the truth. We've got the notes on the page. We definitely have that. What we don't have is the sound. And in this edition, in my Mysteries of Sound series, we're going to dive into one of the strangest paradoxes in all of Western music. Bach may be the most precisely notated composer in history, and we have no clue what he actually sounded like. And when you look at the sheet music for something written by Bach, it feels authoritative. It's clean, it's exact, measured, almost mathematical. It gives the impression that everything is fixed: pitch, rhythm, harmony, structure. It certainly looks like that on paper. But that certainty is an illusion, because musical notation, for all its precision, is not sound. It's a set of instructions on how to make sound. It's like the difference between a set of instructions on how to build a bookshelf and the actual finished bookshelf. And in music, those instructions leave out an astonishing amount of information. You see, Bach never told us exactly how fast to go, how loud to play, exactly how to shape every phrase, exactly how the instrument itself should behave. And most importantly, he never told us what in tune even meant. Now see, today we take tuning for granted. You sit down at a piano and every key is already correct. But in Bach's world, tuning was not standardized. It was kind of negotiated. There was no single system. It varied a lot depending on what instrument you were playing, in what building you were playing, even in what town you were in at the time. It all varied. Instead, there were multiple competing systems of tuning, ways of adjusting pitches so that music could function across different keys. Some keys sounded pure. Some keys sounded tense. And some sounded just downright wrong. And that was not a mistake. That was the design. Bach's famous well-tempered clavier is often misunderstood here. I had many music instructors tell me that it was Bach's little insidious way of coaxing people into using equal temperament tuning. But it does not. It refers to a flexible tuning system that made all keys usable but not identical, which means something important. A prelude in C major and a fugue in B minor didn't just feel different emotionally, they literally sounded different in their tuning structure. So when we play Bach today on a modern piano tuned in equal temperament, we're hearing a version of Bach that has been acoustically flattened. Every key equal, every interval standardized, every color normalized, and that ain't the way Bach heard it or wrote it. Now, let's make things even more unstable. Even if you agree on how to tune, you still got to decide what pitch to tune to. Today, we live in a world centered around A440, 440 hertz. That's the standard tuning pitch. And it sounds like this. That is our reference pitch. It's what orchestras tune to. It's what tuning apps give you. It's what pianos are built around. But that standard is relatively recent, only officially established in 1939. For centuries, pitch was wildly inconsistent. It was all over the place. In some places, A might be closer to 415 hertz. In others, it might creep up toward 465 hertz or even higher. Basically a whole step across different regions. And it wasn't random. Organs, for example, were often built to suit a particular building. Once installed, couldn't really be adjusted, so the pitch of the ensemble was determined by the instrument, not the other way around. If you moved from one city to another, you didn't just encounter a new style, you encountered a new pitch universe. And Bach lived right in the middle of all that. Over time, pitch began to creep upward, a phenomenon sometimes called pitch inflation. Ensembles liked the brighter, more brilliant sound of higher pitch, so they kept kind of nudging it upward. But by the 19th century, this became a problem because singers were really straining to hit those high notes. Instruments were even being pushed beyond comfortable limits. Eventually, the international community attempted to stabilize things. In 1939, a conference in London recommended that A be 440 hertz. Later, organizations like the International Organization for Standardization formalized it, and that's where we landed. But Bach never heard A equal 440, not once. So what was it like in Bach's lifetime? Well, that depended on where you were, what instrument you were playing, and what type of composition it was. For example, chamber pitch was used by court orchestras and secular ensemble music and ran a little lower, roughly about A415, which is why A415 became associated with Baroque performance practice today. Now, this is about 30 seconds of a Bach concerto as it would sound today. And this is the same 30 seconds of the same concerto as it would have sounded in 1730. Can you hear that it's lower? I mean, it's not any slower, but the pitch is definitely lower. Now let's talk about instruments, because Bach didn't write for abstract sound. He wrote for specific instruments in specific spaces, organs that were tuned to the architecture of the church where they were, harpsichords that varied wildly in construction, violins with gut strings instead of steel, choirs trained in regional styles. Even the acoustics mattered. A stone church in Leipzig does not behave like a modern concert hall. Sound lingers, it blends, it softens the edges. So tempo, articulation, and phrasing were shaped by the actual room itself. Modern performances often aim for clarity, crisp articulation, clean lines. Bach's world was different. It was often more blended, more resonant, more spatial. So again, we're not just missing details. We're missing the environment that created the sound. Okay, now let's add another layer to all this. How about language? Bach wrote most of his vocal music in German and Latin, with a couple of things in Italian. But even pronunciation was not standardized. There were accents. Latin, in particular, was pronounced differently from region to region. German itself carried strong regional dialects, which means that even the vowels, the actual shape of sung sound, would have differed from what we hear today. A choir in Leipzig did not sound like a choir in Hamburg or Berlin, and neither sounds like a modern conservatory choir trained in standardized diction. So the sound of Bach's vocal music is not just about pitch and harmony, it's about the physical shaping of the language in the mouth. And that, too, is gone. You're listening to The Tom Daniels Show, and we'll be right back.
The Tom Daniels Show. What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniels Show. What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniels Show. What are you waiting for? The Tom Daniels Show.
Welcome back to the Tom Daniels Show. Hey, Mary Mac was able to show us what Bach really sounded like because Mary Mac is the world's most perfect band. And we've been talking about good old Johann Sebastian Bach, and here's another layer to this mystery. Now, this layer might be even more surprising than temperament or pitch. We tend to think of Johann Sebastian Bach as mathematical, architectural, almost clinical. Perfect counterpoint. Perfectly balanced voices, everything locked into place like some kind of blueprint. And because of that reputation, modern performances of Bach often lean in that direction, clean, precise, rhythmically exact, and emotionally restrained to the point of neutrality. That's a problem, because Bach did not live in a mechanical age. He lived in the Baroque era. And whatever else you want to say about the Baroque, emotionless is not one of them. The Baroque era was obsessed with expression. Everything, especially opera, dripped with passion. Drama, contrast, intensity, pain and joy, light and shadow, tension and release. The Baroque era was a highly romantic era of music. In fact, Baroque composers worked under something called the doctrine of the affections, the idea that music was supposed to actively move the listener's emotional state, not just decorate it, not just accompany it, move it. Music wasn't background, it was persuasion, it was rhetoric, it was emotional argument, and Bach was a master of that language. His music breathes in long vocal phrases. It leans into dissonance and then resolves it with purpose. It builds tension, releases it, and then builds it again. It behaves less like a machine and more like a human voice speaking with conviction. But here's what's happened over time. As music education becomes more systemized, especially in the 19th and 20th centuries, Bach became the model of correctness. Students were taught Bach as the foundation of harmony, counterpoint, and voice leading, which is absolutely true, but in the process, something subtle shifted. Bach stopped being performed as rhetoric and started being performed as demonstration. Clean lines, even articulation, metronomic steadiness, everything in its place. And somewhere along the way, the emotional urgency that defined the Baroque style got sanded down into something safe, more controlled, more predictable, more polite. Now, to be fair, clarity does matter in Bach. I mean, you can't just smear it into romantic excess and call it a day. The structure's real, and it's got to be honored, but structure was not Bach's end goal. It was just the vehicle to get there. Bach wasn't writing exercises and practices. He was writing expression. So when we hear Bach played like a machine, perfect, even, controlled, detached, we're not hearing historical accuracy. We're hearing a modern habit, a kind of interpretive minimalism that mistakes precision for meaning. And in doing so, it's stripping away the very thing that Baroque music was designed to do, which was to move you. When I was a wee young music major in college at Auburn, my piano instructor, Bob Richardson, assigned me to play selections from a little collection called First Lessons in Bach. Specifically, I was to play the minuet in G minor, which goes like this. However, every time I practiced it, the melancholy sound of the minor mode just called out to me, and I gradually began playing it like a Chopin nocturne. My dynamics were all over the place. My beat and tempo fluctuated depending on the phrasing. Technically, I played it wrong, but Bob Richardson arranged for me to play it on convocation in front of the entire music department, and he later told me that my highly romantic interpretation of Bach was one of the highlights of his teaching career. At the time, I didn't even know enough to realize what I'd done. All I knew is that it felt right. Which brings us back to the larger mystery. If we don't know the tuning, if we don't know the pitch, if we don't know the instruments, and now we realize we may not even be preserving the emotional language correctly, and what exactly are we hearing when we hear Bach today? Not the original sound, but kind of a version of it, filtered through centuries of changing taste. So now we arrive at the uncomfortable question of the episode. If temperament varies, if pitch varies, if instruments vary, if acoustics vary, if language varies, and what does it even mean to perform Bach correctly? The answer is, doesn't mean what we think it means. Because there is no single, recoverable original, only informed approximations, historically informed performance using period instruments, lower pitch standards like A = 415, and reconstructed temperaments gets us closer in some ways, but even that's just a reconstruction. A best guess, a carefully researched illusion. And here's the twist. That may not exactly be a failure. That may be the whole point. We tend to think of great music as something fixed, a definitive version, a correct interpretation. But Bach lived in a musical culture that was far more fluid. Music was adapted and adjusted and reperformed in new contexts. Even Bach himself revised his own works constantly. So maybe the goal was never to freeze the sound. Maybe the goal was to create something that could live, something that could survive variation, something that could be reinterpreted without breaking. In that sense, Bach's music is not a fixed object, it's a framework, a structure that invites sound without prescribing it completely. I wish I heard more musicians interpret Bach that way, because I believe he would have approved. So what did Bach actually sound like? Well, I hate to have taken you all this way for this, but we don't know. We can't know. And the closer we look, the more that answer dissolves. Different tuning systems, different pitch levels, different instruments, different rooms, different voices, different languages. Every performance is a choice among possibilities that Bach himself never fully locked down on a page of sheet music. Which brings us back to where we started in the first place. We got the notes, we don't have the sound. And maybe that's why Bach endures. Because instead of preserving a single perfect version, he left us something far more powerful. He left us music that can never be completely recovered, and therefore can never be completely exhausted. Thank you, everybody. This has been the Tom Daniels Show. Keep listening. Keep learning.
Keep listening, keep learning. The Tom Daniels Tom Daniel Show. Take a break from your usual routine and tune into the Tom Daniel Show. You'll discover the world of melodies and stories that you might not know. Keep listening, keep learning, the Tom